Good evening, folks. We're doing a show. Got a really good show. It's the follow-up to the last show that we did on September 4th. It's been 5 days. We're on again. Hope you enjoy it. A lot of information, so put on your thinking caps. Please share this out. Share it with your friends. Share it with your non-friends. Just share it so more people can watch, because it's really important information.
Share it in groups.
Share it in groups.
Sharing is caring. Welcome, everyone, to Mexican Crossing Lines with your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPPLP, Fargo, Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Tonight's show is very, very important. It's important for a variety of reasons. Tonight's show is focused on the contemptuous director of the Butterfly Center. The Butterfly Center became the focus of this reporter when they began a resistance camp, an activist camp for the Border Support Network at the Butterfly Center. I started to see many of the figures that we saw crossing the border, that we saw involved in the investigations on the watch list that the government was compiling of activists that were being looked at more closely for their involvement in the smuggling operations and organized crime at the border with regard to the caravans. And you all may recall that I did a conference, that I spoke at a conference along with a professor from George Mason University based on the research and the reports of yours truly that took place in San Diego, California on April of 2019.
Yep, and
correct.
People helped fundraise for that trip, and thank you very much to people that supported us, made that trip possible.
And one of the reasons why we were so upset and disappointed at the ABS conference was because the way we were censored, the way we were hidden so that we could not present our information, and we were not allowed to record it, which was one of the prerequisites that I was assured that I would be able to do at this conference so that I could share this work with my audience. That's why I had my audience help fundraise for the trip, because I was going to share this with my audience. So, in May of 2019, Professor Correa Cabrera presented this information again And this time, she was guaranteed she would be able to videotape the presentation. And she did. And we made it available to all of you. I was not present at this conference that took place in Brownsville, Texas in May of 2019. But I was part of the presentation in video form. And recently, I showed you that the El Paso Tribune shared information about how the We Build a Wall people are being sued by the National Butterfly Center people. And I also shared with you that the people at the National Butterfly Center that are suing the We Build a Wall people, whose director, Mariana Trevino Wright, did a presentation at that conference in Brownsville, Texas in May of 2019 as well. She was not one of the featured speakers like Professor Correa Cabrera was, but she also presented. And more importantly, Guadalupe Correa Cabrera was once again attacked. The last time I shared excerpts from Mariana Trevino Wright's presentation at that conference, I will once again, in the comments of this show, share the link so you can go listen to the conference presentation by Mariana Trevino Wright in its entirety. It is important for you to know what is contained in that presentation because it is, in essence, her history, the history of the Butterfly Center, and everything that she claims was done wrong in the and everything, and harassing her, harassing the Butterfly Center, taking private property, threats, building happening before appropriations by Congress were made. Lots of allegations that she makes about how this was handled. And you also have to remember, this is a woman who went and testified before Congress. In fact, I have a clip that I failed to share with you from that congressional testimony. This one comes from a panel she had with Congress member Raul Grijalva. And in this clip, she talks about all of the folks that will have access to the section of the border wall which will have gates to allow people that work and live or have property right there enter and exit the country. And she is asked about whether or not this is going to make border security more dangerous. And this is what she had to say.
Communities and others to pass through, and we all get the gate code. So every one of our members and visitors gets the code to the border wall gate.
I suspect it wouldn't be difficult for the transnational gangs and others to somehow get access to the codes.
Actually, now they won't have to bribe or blackmail any Border Patrol agent. They just have to join the National Butterfly Center or have a, I mean, it embarrasses me.
I've got to Google.
Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing that she's joking about giving access to criminals if they become members of the Butterfly Center. She's like, people don't have to bribe folks, border agents, to let them through. You just need to become a member of the Butterfly Center. And here's the part that's not funny, folks. The part that's not funny is that we documented a slew of people that were at this Butterfly Center, some of which are pictured in one of the photos from an article in Intercontinental Cry just behind my head. Many of whom are frauds, felons, paid for activist media, people connected to Standing Rock, professional Standing Rock protesters or water protectors as they call themselves, and sex workers, because we keep bringing those up. They keep showing up, right? A lot of Antifa connections. And I showed you that those folks were on a watch list, that they were being investigated by Mexico, by Department of Homeland Security. They were on a watch list for Border Patrol. I told you they got detained at the border, some of them numerous times, and were interrogated about what they were doing. I told you that the FBI was investigating these folks and their activities at the border. And I want to remind you that at the time that this conference happened in May, what was going on around the activists, from many of them connected to this camp. Here's an article from Shadowproof. And in this article, you will see that they're talking about the Border Patrol Museum and the protest that took place where people came in the Border Patrol Museum, singing and chanting with signs, that they vandalized the inside of the museum. Arrests were made. You may recall that I showed you this. Now I want you to scroll down on that article, because this is just one of the actions that took place. And you will see here that arrests were made, that people that were part of the coalition Tornillo, the occupation, were involved at this and other actions that took place, protests within the city of El Paso and in other places in Texas, including climbing one of the buildings for one of the detention facilities, or the people that own the detention facility. And if you could scroll to the bottom of this article, you'll see that this particular location, the Border Patrol agents, they were all attending an event, seminars, which were led by none other than Cass County Sheriff Paul Laney, former Cass County Sheriff Paul Laney of North Dakota, who took part in the Dakota Access Pipeline protest as one of the lead law enforcement, working in conjunction with other law enforcement from around the country. So Paul Laney, our former sheriff, was there doing presentations about the dangers of protesters. Ironically.
Yeah, it is.
The danger, the danger to national security from these types of activists. And they were protesting, they were creating actions where the police needed to come in. One of them, the woman, Patricia Cuomo, who formerly became famous for climbing the Statue of Liberty, went to the protest. I believe it was in Dallas or Houston. I can't remember. But one of the cities that they went to protest in, major city that went to protest in, that had one of the buildings of the company, one of the main companies that runs the detention centers. And she climbed to the top of it and refused to come down until the police came and pulled her down with a cherry picker. While all of this was being live streamed by actor and felon Louis Monsivice, also associated with this Butterfly Center. Now, why do I have to, revive all of these names and remind you of the history of what was going on at this time? Well, it is precisely because at this conference, Professor Correa Cabrera, who is an expert in her field, having to do with people being smuggled, children, trafficking of women and children, organized crime, cartels in particular, and the study of migration. This woman went to share her our work and was attacked by Mariana Treviño Wright and another person, Christopher Balsadu, who is also one of the tribal members of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe that formed the encampment at the Butterfly Center. And I'm going to have you listen to the recording of the interview between Guadalupe Correa Cabrera and Mariana Treviño Wright, along with Christopher Balsadu. These are the three people's voices that you will be hearing in the recording that I'm going to play for you tonight. But I want to remind you first that just just this summer, June or July, I can't remember exactly when these tweets came out, but I believe they were in June or July. The tweets between the Butterfly Center and the lawyer from the Crooked Lawyers Group, Al Otro Lado, decided to publicly defame and slander both Correa Cabrera and myself in their tweets. Here's a tweet from the National Butterfly Center in which the National Butterfly Center is tweeting that Guadalupe Correa Cabrera is using research and mapping social networks of activists so that they can be targeted. Notice that she is claiming that we are putting the activists in danger. That is the claim that is being made here. That the research and the work done by Correa Cabrera and myself is being used by the government to surveil, identify, and snatch them, the activists. And then if you scroll to the bottom of this tweet, you'll notice that Correa Cabrera tweets back, "This is libel. You should prove your allegations before a judge. You are stating here in writing that Department of Homeland Security is paying me to assure that is extremely delicate, I think. I don't know. Yep. And your comment has been recorded. I don't know. Redact. I don't know. I can't tell what those. That's something is covering it. Mm-hmm. My work on the caravans and something involved has not been sponsored by any government agency, which is what she was going to say. Not that there would be anything wrong if it were, but what this woman from the National Butterfly Center is doing, along with the crooked lawyer from Al Otro Lado, Nicole Ramos, in these series of tweets that I showed you on my past show, is trying to demonize the professor as someone who is targeting innocent people, innocent activists and journalists and their allies and indigenous people and vulnerable people, and putting their lives at risk. That's what she's doing. And the government is funding it. Mm-hmm. When none of that is true. Here is another tweet in which she goes on to question Correa Cabrera, saying, okay, you're not funded by the Department of Homeland Security, but you said that the state, the quote, if you scroll down there, she uses it right from the presentation that Correa Cabrera did in May. Your program, she was recently principal investigator on a research grant to study organized crime and trafficking in persons in Central America and along Mexico's eastern migration routes, supported by the Department of State Office to monitor the state's office to monitor and combat trafficking. That is very different from saying that she's funded by the Department of Homeland Security for the current work that she and I were doing that they shared. And in this tweet, Nicole Ramos, going back and forth with the Butterfly Center, libeling and defaming the work of this professor and mine, she says that Professor Correa Cabrera has specifically targeted her research against Al Otro Lado, the lawyers group, and made defamatory statements. Just this month, she was presenting her evidence at ELCOLEF, another conference. No doubt not revealing to those who invited her that her research is funded by DHS and has no IRB approval. Once again, she is repeating that this woman is funded by DHS, which again, there would be nothing wrong with the work of this professor, this research being funded by the government, by the State Department, by whoever wanted to fund her work. But it's simply not true. It's simply not true. And the reason she is doing that is because she wants to take the research done by this professor, which is independent, right? It's independent, and try to categorize it as being biased because somehow the dark money of the government, of this administration, is funding her and funding me. They claim I'm Koch funded, that we're oil company funded. They don't prove a word of what they say. They don't prove a word of what they say. They just say it because they want to defame and discredit the work of this professor. Now, for those of you who don't know what an IRB is, let me explain it to you as it was explained to me by this professor. An IRB is a board. It is the Institutional Review Board, which is an administrative body that was established, to protect the rights and the welfare of human research subjects who are recruited to participate in research activities conducted under the auspices of an institution with which someone is affiliated with. In this case, what this crooked lawyers group, al otro lado, the lawyer's tweet says is that this professor is using research involving humans for which she did not obtain an IRB. She did not have a review into the ethics and approval of the ethics behind her research of individuals, in this case, activists. What she fails to say disingenuously, what Nicole Ramos fails to say, is that when this research, most of which is based on the reports of yours truly, which involves social media posts which are public. My research is based on social media posts which are public by individuals who consider themselves to be public figures and are operating in the public sphere. So there would be no expectation of privacy when these people are putting out their tweets, their Facebook posts, giving interviews to the mainstream media and others, live streaming their lives and their activities. They would have no expectation of privacy, nor were they recruited by George Mason University to be participants in any study. There is no requirement for an IRB, and yes, there was a review of the research of the work done by this professor and myself, and it did not require one. No IRB was necessary because of what I just explained to you about the public nature of the contents. And here's what is even more disturbing. As we listen to this interview, I want you to hear who she is defending, okay? What she is defending, because she is doing two things. She is defending the activists that are associated with the Butterfly Center, and I'm going to remind you a little bit of who they are. Under the auspices of protecting the natural sanctuary of the butterflies, as well as preserving the sovereignty rights of the indigenous Carrizo Comencrudos and their artifacts and their burial sites, right? And she is simultaneously attacking Guadalupe Correa Cabrera her work and mine and making defamatory statements about my research. And I'm going to let you listen to it. We may not get through the whole thing, but we're going to break it down. We're going to break it down because I want you to hear, with her own words, the contempt that she has for myself, for the professor, for the research, the work that we presented, and for this administration and for the people building the wall. She makes no secret of it here. She is not an unbiased person that is simply looking out for the interest of the butterflies and the natural habitat of the place where she works. She is not an unbiased person. She is not somebody that just that's been fighting border issues and immigration policy from her birth. She, in her presentation, talks about the fact that she recently came to this issue. She was hired by the Butterfly Center to raise the profile of the Butterfly Center because the Butterfly Center itself was going to be used as part of a lawsuit against the people building the wall. What better way to discredit the We Build a Wall people, the need for a wall in and of itself, and all of those who have been trying to help to shore up our border to stop human smuggling and trafficking. But to defame them, to shame them publicly, to have some of them arrested, and for everyone to see that reflecting horribly on this administration. Everyone came away with the arrests of the We Build a Wall people, including Bannon and Colfage, thinking that these arrests mean that this was a whole hoax, a fraud, that people were defrauded of their money. And all of that remains to be seen. But what I can tell you is what Mariana Trevino Wright wanted was to shift the investigation, the research, and the reporting done by this professor and yours truly somewhere else. This is what she had to say. Listen.
Is to prove how
the evangelical group. Sorry.
Mariana Trevino, right?
Okay, Mariana Trevino, right?
No, what I was just saying is, yes, there are many who may blame Soros or credit Soros for the movement of the migrant caravans, but we have a president who is figuratively in bed with the evangelical Christians in this country. They agreed to support him in exchange for having Roe v. Wade challenged in the hope that they can enact, as they are doing in state houses across the country, very restrictive abortion laws. And
right.
Because that is the only thing that matters to them. They don't care that he's this gluttonous, adulterous, philandering, lying, thieving sack of shit. They just want abortion outlawed. So they have this unholy alliance. But the profiteers, the oligarchs in America, Energy Transfer Partners, and the oil companies, SLSCO, the Sullivan Brothers, the Kelsey Warrens of the world.
Who are the Sullivan Brothers?
They own SLSCO.
This is.
Okay. So you can tell there's contempt there, right? Mm-hmm. This is about a lot of things. It's not about the Butterfly Center. I want you to listen carefully how many times during this entire interview the woman who is the director of the Butterfly Center that you hear speaking, Mariana Trevino Wright, talks about butterflies or nature or the ocelot or the lizards or the food chain or the types of plants that the butterflies feed on or anything about the Butterfly Center. I want you to listen for her talking about the Butterfly Center, because you're going to hear about a whole bunch of other things like abortion rights. That had to be in there, right? You just heard that. And she is pointing fingers at pipeline builders, right? At Energy Transfer Partners, at Kelsey Warrens. Now, oh, by the way, let me just say, at some point in the recording, you're going to hear this professor tell Mariana Trevino Wright that this interview, which she got permission to record, is just for her reference. It's not going to be published in any of the work published by Guadalupe Correa Cabrera in her research, which, of course, it is not. However, I want you all to know that this was recorded with her permission, and Christopher Balsadu's permission, which you will also hear on this recording. And 2, they were at a conference, at a public event, which was attended by dozens and dozens of people, in which they were allowed to record. And 3rd, that this took place in Brownsville, Texas, Texas being a one-party state, where you don't have to tell anybody else you're recording them, especially in a place where they would have no expectation of privacy, like a conference where other people are recording. So I want you to know the provenance of the recording and understand how it was obtained and why it is, why she shares this piece, why Guadalupe at some point will say that she's not going to be publishing this as part of her research. Go ahead.
This is a company that you were talking about
Yes.
yesterday, right?
They've won multiple border wall construction contracts in at least 3 states: California, New Mexico, and Texas.
Okay.
The contract they won just for the 6 miles of border wall through the National Butterfly Center was $145 million. And this is a ton of money.
This started in 2017,
Yes.
after Trump
The
was
appropriation was made in 2018.
elected. Right.
But, for those people to throw $500,000 toward whoever to fund 7,000 people coming coincidentally ahead of midterms and a federal budget battle for more border wall, there are no coincidences.
There are no coincidences.
And,
That's correct.
and
You're
all
totally
of
right.
the migrants have nothing to gain other than possibly being granted asylum within the United States. The evangelical churches, in terms of bringing the migrants or assisting them, again, have nothing to gain. The only ones, if you follow the money, the only ones with anything to gain are the oil and construction companies.
That's right. But I would like to understand much better your...
Hold on, before we get to the next thing. You just heard this woman say that the groups, the nonprofits, the churches, the shelters that are bringing these migrants have nothing to gain. I beg to differ. As you know, the nonprofits, the shelters, the groups bringing the migrants have been fundraising, and the people giving them legal counsel or claiming to be giving them legal counsel have been raising millions of dollars. People have been getting trafficked, smuggled. People have been creating fake families, fake marriages to cross people into the United States so that they can get sponsored and await an asylum hearing they probably don't qualify for. I've already shared all of this with you. You already know all of this other stuff that I went in and covered in Tijuana and that I shared with you along with Oscar El Blue Ramirez. You already saw all of that, right? This is a $1 billion business, smuggling people. It is a $1 billion business with a B. And this woman wants you to believe that none of the actors that she's involved with, none of the people that are activists at this camp, that none of the lawyers groups, that none of the NGOs and nonprofits have anything to gain. Oh no, they are white as the driven snow. It's the pipeline companies that have something to gain. Now, I'm not saying the pipeline companies have clean hands, okay? I'm not saying that. And as you will hear, this professor is trying desperately to be fair, objective, and hear the complaint and the contempt for her research and her work, because it isn't focused where Mariana Treviño Wright thinks it should be focused, which is on the pipeline company owners and the president and his administration. And you will hear how she bangs her fist in anger, how she speaks and almost yells at Guadalupe Correa Cabrera because she is so angry with the way that Guadalupe has focused her research on these activists at the National Butterfly Center encampment. Take a listen for yourselves.
Your presentation, and I mean, I'm sorry, but you probably have much better understanding of how these pipelines and the system works and all that. I would like to understand how you how you jump from the border wall to the levees. I mean, we talked about that, but I just wanted to, I just want to understand better what is the connection. You showed us the map where we have these pipelines that go to South Texas, and they are connected to the 3 LNG stations, right? That you know.
Well, none of them currently are. They've just recently permitted the 3 LNG terminals in the Laguna Madre, at the port of Brownsville.
Right.
That's all recent.
Right. I remember that in 2016, the mobilization against that was taking place, but it was a very small one. Tierra Club and other groups like Terry and everybody.
It's continuing. It's still ongoing.
Yeah. They're still fighting it, still protesting it. In the meantime, permits are being awarded, including an international one that will go from Matamoros to Brownsville.
Who is fighting? I mean, who's trying to construct that? Which company?
Total, I think, has the. I don't have all of those notes with me. Juan Mancias would be an excellent one to talk about because they are very much monitoring that along with the Society of Native Nations. And, but there's Jupiter, there's Total, there's the Valley Pipeline.
Valley Crossing Pipeline.
Valley Crossing Pipeline is the one from Matamoros to Brownsville. Mm-hmm. And there's another one that already exists across the river. Mm-hmm. And there will be more, especially, and more demand and more need and more international use when and if AMLO does nationalize Pemex again. As, you know, that's why Mexico really isn't fighting the construction of the border wall. That's why the IBWC in Mexico is not fighting the construction of the border wall, which is going to cause catastrophic flooding in Mexico. And we haven't heard one peep from the Mexico. I mean, this is a treaty organization that is supposed to be made up of two equal partners, the United States and Mexico, with regard to the International Boundary and Water Commission. And the construction of the border wall, everywhere it's going, violates this international treaty. Why isn't Mexico protesting it?
Well, I mean, that's the simple answer, right? But this is super simple. Why? Without considering the potential flooding of our side of the border, and you tell me why, because we don't understand it very well. It's like we don't pay for the wall. I mean, it's not our taxes. It's just
no, but your problem. People and your property are going to be destroyed, washed away, and killed because in the international floodway, They are building concrete and steel barrier that the river used to be able to, if it crested, go over.
But the
In
but
both
the
directions.
wall is constructed. It's not constructed.
It's constructed in the floodway.
Okay.
It is being constructed in the floodway. And there is an 800, 900 page report out there from the global firm Baker Engineering that details how, where, when, to what degree exactly the flooding will occur as the steel bollards clog from floating debris in a flood. And it is catastrophic. And the government commissioned that report back in, I want to say 2006-ish. Maybe it was 2005, maybe it was 2007. You can find the report or I can send you the link.
Yeah, I would love to.
I mean, it's on Dropbox because it is 800, 900 pages.
But it's out. I mean,
Yeah.
I can just like Google
Through
it.
FOIA.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that you can find it floating around the internet. Actually, it
Baker
was.
Engineering.
It was, there was a link to it online in a Texas Observer article written by Scott Nickel, I believe, that was published by Texas Observer, and there's a hyperlink
Scott.
to this report. The government paid for this report, and they didn't like what it said. So they said, that's nice, but we need a report that says this. So they hired a bunch of employees that left Baker Engineering, started their own firm, and the government hired them to write another report.
But nothing is going to happen.
That said,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, but I would like to listen to that.
Yeah.
And the reason why Mexico, to my understanding, is not saying anything is just because, like, I don't care. You
No,
use your taxes.
they know that it's going to cause flooding.
Okay.
Loss of life, loss of property, and everything.
And why you say Mexico is not doing anything? Because
Well,
you
the
think that
IBWC, the Mexican section of the IBWC, is not standing up for Mexico in this
and why do you think? I mean, why you're
because the government has told them not to, because the infrastructure is going to be built that benefits the Mexican government. And the oligarchs in Mexico, the oil and gas companies.
Yep. Okay, and so can you tell me a little bit more about that map and how you are saying in a very interesting way this is not about the wall, this is about pipeline. This is about a pipeline.
This is
Natural
about
gas?
using the racism, the nationalism, the immigration crisis to seize private property in Texas.
Okay. So I just want to break down a couple of things that are important because she's asking her about the gaps in her presentation. She's making allegations about why there is a lawsuit that is trying to stop the border wall construction at the Butterfly Center and why everything about the construction and what it's going to do is wrong, including the harassment, the threats, the absurdity of the coded, the gates that are going to have codes, the, cemetery for veterans, the indigenous sacred lands, you name it. A lot of these things were part of this presentation, which is why I asked you guys to go listen to it, because I think it's important for you to know the background of the allegations that are being made. And Guadalupe was simultaneously attacked for the research that she presented. And this woman, Mariana Treviño Wright, is essentially saying to her that a good source for the information to find out more about these gaps in the lack of an explanation, a clear connection between what she is saying about the levees and the wall. She says, how do you make this jump from here to here? How do you explain this and this? And she's asking her questions. And she says, you really need to talk to Juan Mancias. Juan Mancias is one of the people, the tribal leader of the not federally recognized Carrizo Come Crudo tribe that heads up this group of activists out at the camp along with Evan Duke and Myron Dewey. These are the folks out there, right? Also, notice how this involves national security, the building of the wall, the damaging of this river, levees, natural habitat, abortions, and pipelines. Because it has to do with the pipelines, right? So here's the part about the pipelines.
And to build the protective barrier behind which they will then be able to construct pipeline without observation, objection, or interference as they experienced at Standing Rock.
Well, in lots of places.
In lots of places, but since we keep going back to that example, once the border wall is built, pues no hay nada que ver.
Nadie sabe.
And how, I mean, that's very, very interesting. And I don't.
So just for you who do not understand Spanish, what she said is that part of the intent of building the border wall is this conspiracy that the border wall will serve as a like a curtain to hide the activities of those building pipelines. And since the wall is going to serve as a curtain, there will be nothing to see behind the curtain, right? Nada que ver, she says. That means nothing to see. And Christopher Balsadu, the member of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe that is also accosting her after her presentation, chimes in and he says, oh, yeah, in Spanish, he says, yes, nothing to observe. So they're both making the claim that the wall serves to hide things. It's going to be used to hide the construction of pipelines. And this is the thinking behind it. Listen.
I mean, I think that is a great possibility. But I would like to know, I mean, that's all possible. But in my case, everybody why are you saying this is a conspiracy theory?
Do your network analysis of Kelsey Warren and Roman Abramovich and Donald Trump and all of these people.
Yes.
Do your network analysis of these guys and you will see they are all standing there holding each other's junk.
Okay. Can you tell me again what are the groups that I need to?
You just need to look at all of these oil and gas companies, Energy Transfer Partners. The CEO is named Kelsey Warren. You need to look at Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, currently energy secretary. You need to look at Trump. You need to look at Roman Abramovich.
Yeah.
And then there are probably a dozen other oil and gas company executives that you need to look at. They're all interconnected.
And you mentioned
in Texas,
and sometimes they share board members.
They do.
So that's another way to look at that.
Yeah. Like I did with this company. Well, it was what was Blackwater, but now is Stellis Inc. That these guys. I mean, it's on the board is where you make the connection between DHS, Department of Defense, and you have the border military industrial complex basically. But okay, that's very, very important. And so you told me yesterday something important, but something interesting. We were talking about Pueblos Sin Fronteras, and we're talking about those who are helping to mobilize the caravans. And I haven't been able to find, otherwise they say that, George Soros is funding the caravans and things like that, right? Which, to some extent, in my network analysis, some of these human rights advocate groups that are all American have received funding from Open Society, but there's not a pattern that connects them, very closely. However, some of these groups that are connected, for example, the Women's March and all the people that, Mark Lane, and all these people are connected to some extent to the Democratic Party, things like that. But that's not, we haven't been able to find who's funding
Let me tell you
the
something.
caravans.
In the film last night, The River and the Wall, they, with, I just lost Andy and the other one, the two who were,
Ben Masters?
not Ben, the two who were illegal immigrants, the two men. And they talked about Reagan and the amnesty and all of that. In the film that started with me, it talks about me being a conservative Republican. I am the daughter of a Mexican national who was always a conservative Republican because Reagan was our fucking hero. We had the first grand amnesty under Reagan. Why do so many poor Mexicans and immigrants in the Rio Grande Valley believe in Trump and the wall and the this and that? Zulema, she only participated in this film with the understanding that they would disclose nothing about the fact that one of her sons works for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and is building the wall, and the other one works for Border Patrol and is actively engaged in family separation.
Well, but that's
Right. But I'm just saying,
we cannot judge
the
that.
Cubans,
Okay. Did you hear her disclose that the movie, one of the documentaries about the fight against the border wall, contains a woman named Zulema? If you go to that page that I shared with you on my last show about the movies and the conference, and I gave you the link to the conference where the presentation took place, so you could see for yourself who spoke at the conference, what movies they looked at, the content of the presentations, etc. Remember, this was a conference in Brownsville, Texas, that took place in May of 2019 about border security. Border security. And she says, I am the daughter of a Mexican immigrant who was a conservative Republican because Ronald Reagan was a GD hero because he gave amnesty to Latinos. And she is angry. She's like, why are all of the Mexicans that are living here in the Rio Grande Valley, why do they believe in Trump, and why do they support Trump, and why do they work for Border Patrol? Do you realize that the woman that is in our movie against the border wall only agreed to be in the movie if we would never ever mention that her son is in Border Patrol and that her other kid is whatever it was? Yeah. So there's an admission from one of the people who you will hear has no love for this administration. I mean, she rattled off the names of a whole bunch of different pipeline company owners and builders and business people, even including this Russian Roman Abramovich. You know, that she's trying to get Guadalupe to focus elsewhere, not on the activists at her Butterfly Center. Again, this is in defense of the Butterfly Center as well as the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe's lands, which of course they're not federally recognized, so they don't really have any land. And what they say is their sacred burial sites for their cemetery, one of their cemeteries. So let's listen to what else she says.
I'm just saying, the Hispanics that come over and pursue the American dream and this, that, and the other.
Turns out to be very conservative.
Exactly. They don't go with the Democratic Party. It's a great fairy tale to tell the scared farmer in Indiana, but it's not fucking true. So then what benefit?
Did you just hear this woman's admission? This is a woman suing the people that are building the wall Okay? Right? And she says it is a fairy tale that Latinos vote for Democrats. They don't. Why, she says, why do all of these people believe in the border wall and Trump? Why do they work in the government and support the border? And why are they conservatives? And Guadalupe agrees with her and she says, yes, most of them are conservative. Stunning admission from her. Incredible admission from her. This is a woman suing the building of the border wall, and she has contempt for him. Listen.
Fit do Soros or the Democrats or anyone get to funding all those people coming over? There is no benefit. You have to look at a benefit analysis. Who wins? Who has the most to gain?
Who has the most to gain?
The contractors and the oil companies. The infrastructure, the construction and existence of it provide dividends to them for years and years and years, even longer than to the for-profit prison companies.
That's correct.
Follow the money.
But again, let's go again to the oil companies. How you make the connection, how to understand how they are involved in this mass movement of people, how to figure out.
Because the only way to get the wall built is to continue to have the U.S. invaded by the brown boogeyman.
Is there a way to follow the money? Okay, because this is very logical.
Okay, and here's another issue. In Texas, private corp.
Now, I don't know if you're catching this, but I want to make an emphasis on this. She's like, okay, the professor says, I hear what you're saying, but how? Please explain yourself. How are you saying that they are the ones responsible for the caravans? How are these people that you claim are responsible for creating the caravans and this mass migration? And she can't do it. She says, she jumps to another subject, and then she tells her again, wait a minute, but how can you connect it? Right? Because she says, well, because they need to have the brown boogeyman in order to justify building the wall. And Guadalupe Correa Cabrera once again asks her for clarity. I want you to show me proof here. Where is the money coming from? How are you connecting that to funding the caravans? And this is what she says. Here's Mariana explaining.
Corporations, oil and gas companies, can exercise eminent domain to seize private property if it is a shared pipeline.
Mm-hmm. What does shared pipeline mean?
That means that Energy Transfer and Jupiter and Valley Access,
different
all
companies
get to use it. They all have to have access to it and get to share it to move their goods.
Oh, okay.
But for one company to control it,
No.
they cannot exercise eminent domain.
Oh, so they partner.
They have to partner and they have to share.
Okay.
Behind the border wall, where the government owns the land and has already seized it, and the president now has unilateral authority to permit a pipeline, he can do it to the one company he likes, who can then charge others whatever they want for use and access to it.
Because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to call for eminent domain.
He doesn't have to share. And the government's already seized the land.
Okay, that's okay. That's true. Is there a way to connect financially the caravans with those groups?
Not that I know of. I mean,
You were talking about the Sullivan brothers, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about the Sullivan
they don't
brothers.
talk. And they are so incredibly closely guarded. Good luck getting to
No, I don't.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't.
like,
No,
they
no.
don't.
Of course, I tried.
There's 3 or 4 of them.
With my book?
And a cousin or something. They don't.
Well, I think in your most recent project, at least from what you've presented so far, it seems that you would like to get at those who have the power to be moving other human beings as pawns. But the equitable analysis that you've used so far, you're listing sincere people who are trying to make a better difference, and you're also sort of, I'm going to use this word sparingly and carefully, but within the context of this presentation where there could have been law enforcement here, you targeted vulnerable people by presenting their names, making them public, and putting them within the same framework of saying that they're nefarious in some way. You didn't use that word, but you're saying these bad actors are happening, these bad things are happening, and oh look, I find that these people are connected and in common. You didn't finger anyone. You didn't say that some people were doing bad things. In the context of the presentation, the implication was clear, and the implication was dangerous because these are actual vulnerable people. Some of the people that you've put up there are people of color. They are indigenous people. Some people are queer people of color, people that receive death threats for their activist work. It was dangerous what you did yesterday. And without giving enough context to communicate to someone like myself or to someone like Mariana, that you weren't targeting these people on purpose in order for a bad outcome to happen for them. It wasn't well communicated. I'm going to believe you when you tell me you had no bad intention. How it was presented made it possible that a bad intention could have happened, or a bad outcome, not bad intention, a bad outcome could have happened.
I think I mentioned the fact that it was a very controversial issue, and I said that.
Yeah, I know you said that.
Okay. I just want to stop for a moment and talk about Christopher Balsadou, okay? Because as you can hear, he is making some, he's confronting Guadalupe Correa Cabrera's presentation of our work, and he is telling her that she is biased, that she didn't come out and say that the people involved are doing bad things, but that there was an implication made that they were nefarious in some way. And that she was, by using the names of people who have made public posts about their activism in groups, organizations, live streams, media, etc., in public forums, right? That just by her documenting that, by her and I documenting that and presenting it at an event where law enforcement might be present, right? Where authorities might be able to hear this, that she was in effect putting people's lives at risk, that amongst the group listed in the research that was presented by Guadalupe Correa Cabrera, there are queer people, indigenous people, right? Some of those queer people and indigenous people that she's talking about is one O.J. Pitaya, or Roberto Nakai Flote, or Pitaya Queen, or Nakai, or Anakai. There's a lot of different names that this transgender activist that studies a graduate program at Harvard and passed herself off as a migrant goes by. But what I do know is that, among other things, she was being investigated in Mexico for trafficking children sexually. I shared all of that information with you. Another one of these indigenous people that are in that research presented by the professor is Juan Mancias, the man you see behind me in the middle of the photograph of the group encamped at the Butterfly Center that Mariana is executive of, that Balsadou is a tribal member of. Balsadou, the guy you're listening to, who is condemning the research of this professor, is one of the tribal members of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe that are trying to stop the building of the border wall by claiming that this cemetery has indigenous people's bones in it. That this area, although they're not a federally recognized tribe, is their land. And that they, as indigenous First Nations people, have more right to that land and to say who's on that land and who crosses that border than the people that live here, the colonizers. Right? And you're going to hear him talk about that. But let me just share with you, Christopher Balsadou was at Standing Rock. Here's a picture of him from 2016. And he was, along with the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe's chief and daughter, part of the protest camp. Here he is in a yurt. In 2017, he posted this picture, but you can see that he describes that this photo was taken in the camp in November in Ochetisacoan, according to Christopher, which is what his profile is on Facebook. Here's his Facebook profile, so you can see it. That's his picture, his avatar on Facebook. And his full name is actually Robert Balsadou. Christopher is his middle name. Here is his listing as a doctor of anthropology from the University of Arizona in Tucson. This is published in 2009, along with an academic publishing of his dissertation. It's titled Variation in the Tohono O'odham Language in Relation to O'odham Adaptation, Language, and Identity, especially Self-Construction in Narrative Discourse and Classical and Colonial Nahuatl, Semiotics, Language, Ideology, Race, and Racism. Oh, wait, that's not his dissertation. That's one of the papers he published. Another one you can see he published in 2009 is We Should Come Together with a Good Thought, the importance of relationships in the life of a Native American church roadman. And that dissertation about the Native American church roadman is actually about his own grandfather, Robert Christopher Balsadou, and his own grandfather. I want to share with you who was at the camp that they're defending is an indigenous people's camp where they're defending the sovereignty of these vulnerable people, right? Let me remind you who was there. Here is an excerpt from Garrett Blair's article in Intercontinental Cry about the encampment. And you can see Dr. Balsadou, Christopher Balsadou, is listed as an anthropologist and member of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe himself. And in the picture above him is the chief, Juan Mancias, and a Standing Rock water protector and drummer and singer, Orlando Cruz. He's also perpetually intoxicated on some kind of a stupefactant or other drug. I'm assuming meth, because he brings up the word meth in his live streams. The folks that were there that appear behind me in this photograph, in fact, which was taken as part of that article that you saw right now, lists the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe being pictured in this photograph with their allies while they're collecting branches. Let me just share with you that only the people with the red arrows are actually considered part of the tribe. That's Juan Mancias, of course, in the middle. His daughter, that's all the way on the other extreme of the photo, Krista Mancias, who will be taking his place as the tribal chairman at some point. And the two women inside of the circle, which are also part of the Mancias family in some extended way. That's it. Every other person in this photograph that is listed as being the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe and their allies is actually the allies. There's more allies than Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. And that's true for most of the photos of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. They just put random Indians in there from other tribes and other fights, like Vanessa Dundon, aka Susie Desba, who came down from Standing Rock, or Orlando Cruz, that's over there in the corner, who's also not from the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. He, I believe, is from California or New Mexico. New Mexico, right?
Yes.
Or V. Patel, one of the reporters dating Garrett Blair that you see down at the bottom of this photograph, both of whom were media allies in this photo. Or you know, Doug Warren, aka Nightlife Jones, the other sex worker that was present with these activists at the Texas camp. And let me remind you that these media allies, as I showed you, many of them are now in Portland or covering some protests somewhere, where they are not just objective observers. They're part and parcel of the activism, right? And who are all of these folks connected with? The media platform that goes all the way back to Standing Rock, TYT, the Young Turks. Here's a photo of Garrett Blair he posted with a cutout of Bernie Sanders, who he was a supporter of, and of course, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. So all of these folks at this camp, most of them are not Carrizo Come Crudo tribesmen. Most of them are activists, and what's furthermore interesting is that most of them have been detained at the border, have been put on a watch list, have been arrested at some point, or are associated with those that are on the watch list for the Department of Homeland Security. Take a look for yourself. This is another photograph from the encampment at the National Butterfly Center, and Nate Dennison on the watch list, Evan K. Duke on the watch list, Brendan Tucker on the watch list, and of course, Dwayne Redwater, who went to Tijuana with Wiaka Eagleman, who's on the watch list. All of these people are connected to this Butterfly Center. This man, Balsadou, is, in my opinion, just like these allies in the media for hire that work with these activists, mercenary activists, I believe that Christopher and other academics are also for hire and for sale. They're also not objective. They're also corrupted. And Balsadou is down there in many of the news reports of what's happening at the border wall construction camp. And he is validating that this is the sacred burial grounds of the people of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, right? In this post by Doug Warren, from the time he was at this National Butterfly Center encampment, he posts about the watch list. And he says, I know there are folks that are on this watch list. You know why? Because a lot of the folks that are associated with the National Butterfly Center, that this woman, Mariana Trevino Wright, and Christopher Balsadou are defending, that happened to be part of the research and reporting that was presented at this conference, are all being investigated by the government. And that's not my fault. The fact that we documented it, the fact that we researched it, or the fact that this professor is presenting it at a conference is not our fault, no matter how it bothers Mr. Balsadou, who claims to be a part of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. Now, let me go a step further. Let me show you that dissertation We should come together with good thought, the importance of relationships in the life of the Native American church roadman, which was authored by Christopher Balsadou. Here it is, published in April of 2016. It was actually published in 2009, excuse me. Here's the 2009 dissertation. You can see from the first page that it's published in 2009 by Christopher Balsadou, who is listed as a doctor of philosophy with a major in anthropology. This is for his dissertation, submitted to the faculty of the Department of Anthropology. And also, in the abstract of this, he says that this dissertation explores the nature of personhood, relationships, and the affectionate adoption between relatives in the life of the Native American church roadmen of Kiowa and Cheyenne heritage. Notice he doesn't mention that this roadman, that is the topic of this dissertation, is Carrizo Come Crudo. It says Kiowa and Cheyenne. It does not say Carrizo Come Crudo back in 2009. And let me remind you folks that this dissertation is about his grandpappy. His grandpappy. His grandpappy, back when he was writing his dissertation in 2009, did not claim to be Carrizo Come Crudo. Nowhere, in fact, in this whole thing does it say that he was part of the Carrizo Come Crudo. So did he just more recently discover that he was also Carrizo Come Crudo? Or did he and a bunch of other people pass themselves off as Indians of a non-federally recognized tribe so that they could make a point, so that they could have a moral high ground from which to talk about the border wall and immigration policy? I would submit to you that there's a good possibility that the latter is true, and this is why. Take a look at this abstract. This is what they say that they are studying. Okay? They're reinterpreting an individualistic perception of identity with a perspective on identity based on shared relationships. So if you have some similarity to other Native Americans, maybe that's a shared relationship, and that gives you a reinterpretation of your perception of self as an indigenous person. And then it also explores the issues of gender and dynamics of gender identity. Okay. All right. And how that shapes family relationships. I would submit to you that the teaching, training, experience of this Professor Balsadou, is in redefining or giving a reason or an excuse for people that are not part of an indigenous tribe or a federally recognized one to claim indigeneity when in fact they don't really live it, have never experienced it. It wasn't part of their tradition. It wasn't part of their life. And let me share with you what he says in his introduction. Again, this is a guy claiming to be a member of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. And it says in his introduction of this dissertation, I am known as Christopher Balsadou. Interesting, because he doesn't go by that anymore. Or Robert Christopher Balsadou. Anyway, he says, I am known as Christopher Balsadou. I was born in California when my parents were experimenting with living in other places other than Texas, because he also comes from Texas, right? Where all of my family has lived for many generations. On both sides, my parents are Mexican, Tejano, Hispanic. Once again, I do not see anywhere here where it says that his family at any point claims to have been Carrizo Come Crudo. It says one of my grandfathers remembers that both his parents were mostly Aztec. Another great grandfather told me we were Aztec and Olmec. Okay? Of course, because of the colonization of the continent of the Americas, Mr. Basaldu also claims to have European and maybe even African heritage, right? How is it possible that somebody that is not part of this community, not part of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, like Lilith Sinclair, right? Vanessa Dundon, how is it that they play that they're part of the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe for the picture, when they're not, when they're clearly not, and even go on as this full service sex worker Lilith Sinclair has gone to do in the Portland riots as a leader of the Black Lives Matter movement in Portland, claiming that she speaks for Indigenous and Black people. Simple. You redefine identity through relationships. That's how you do it. You don't actually have to be from a specific tribe or have a provenance or be able to trace your genealogy back to it. Take a look at what is written inside of this dissertation about the history of this man. He talks about how all Native Americans, Indigenous people, especially from the perspective of his grandpa. He calls Tao, my Tao. You know what I mean, Sonny Boy. All of us brown people, brown-skinned people up here, Mexico, South America, we're all Native people. We are all Indigenous. So he asks, his grandpa tells him, everybody that's brown, everybody that's on this continent is Indigenous. And he said, I questioned my Tao a little further at this point, even us Mexicans. And my Tao responded, yeah, most of them. Even our Kiowa people would take Mexican captives too. One of my Tao's ancestors that he can recall was a Mexican captive. So there you have it. He is talking to his grandpa. And in this dissertation, by the way, he tells him, I got to write this paper. I have to research some Indians and I have to write this thing. And he goes, well, why don't you just do a paper on me? I'm Indigenous. And by the way, so are you. He's like, Mexicans are Indigenous? He's like, yeah, they are. But you can tell this wasn't an identity that Basaldu had taken on. Clearly, this was something new to him. At the point that he was doing his dissertation, he is clearly reconnecting, refinding his Indigenous roots and creating an identity based on that. And that's what he's been doing ever since, even and up until this May. Here is a post with the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, an event that was held for a tribunal on human rights by the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. And in it, Basaldu is quoted. He said, the people are reawakening. We are remembering who we are, hearing the voices of the ancestors so that we may take up these relationships again. You see, we need to have these relationships to our indigeneity. It's not enough anymore for Basaldu in this generation of his people to merely be a Mexican and a Tejano and of Aztec and Olmec ancestry. Now he has to own and embody his Kiowa, his Cheyenne, and also his possibly made-up Carrizo Come Crudo tribe ancestry. And those are more important than his Mexicanness. That part of his identity is, not that important. Just kind of kick it over there. Why is that? Why are you who claim that you understand and know the difference and that all people of this continent are Indigenous, why are you committing lateral violence, Professor Basaldu? Why are you committing lateral violence as is Mariana Treviño Wright, whose daddy is Mexican, right? She's also committing lateral violence against a Mexican professor and an expert in the field. They're slandering her on Twitter they're attacking her and attacking my reporting as well. Take a listen to what else Mr. Balsado said in this recording. Here he goes, complaining some more about the research.
But remember, if your target is
And I'm with Pitaya Queen. I mean, this woman or whatever her name is, because she changes her name all the time, and I know that you know her. You know
which woman that changes.
You talked about a woman of color, a person of color that was you transgender or something like that. You used right now. You used that
You said a queer person of color, and she's referencing some woman, I guess, on the network who changes her name,
right.
or I don't know who that is.
That's what I. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm just so perplexed that you would take your talents and your skills to name vulnerable and poor people who are not a part of the powerful structures that are actually causing violence and damage here in our communities or across the country or prior up at Standing Rock. I'm very confused about that.
Oh, well, I'm starting to trying to understand what is happening with the migrant caravans, because I explained that. I started with people that I identified, and I showed who I identified. And this is why I got connected with Cindy Gomez-Schempp, because she was looking into the same people that so we just try to...
And do you know that the people she's been looking into, that at times she has called for violence against these people?
She does not call for violence against these people.
You don't have to call for it. When you publish names and you start saying that this is a bad actor, then because of the interconnections that we have through social media, which is one of the platforms through which social organization and social justice movement happens, people get threatened.
Okay. I just need to reiterate what he just said. He says he demands that this professor explain why she is researching these individuals. Why are you doing this work? And she says, because I'm trying to understand who is moving the people in the caravans. And I identified certain individuals through my own research that I was looking into. Pitaya Queen was one of them because, as you recall, she was the head of the LGBTQIA part of the caravan, and they arrived first and were given priority in Tijuana when they arrived. Remember that? So she was one of the first people that, Guadalupe identified moving with the caravans, advocating for the caravans and moving them. But that wasn't the only person. And she found out about my reporting. Guadalupe Correa Cabrera found out about my reporting because when I saw these activists in Tijuana, I reached out to a number of Tijuana reporters, including Oscar El Blue Ramirez. But that was not the only person I reached out to. I also reached out to Alfredo Alvarez. And he was very intrigued with my reporting. I sent him further information, particularly about Pitaya Queen, but also about other activists that were at the Benito Juarez encampment. Upon doing this, Alfredo Alvarez used the reports that I sent to him and reported that information in Mexico. And when that happened, Professor Correa Cabrera saw those reports and contacted the reporter and asked him for more information about his investigative reporting on this topic. And he said, well, guess what? This information came from a reporter in Minnesota. Here's her phone number and her information. And that is how Guadalupe Correa Cabrera contacted me. Okay? So this guy, he wants to know why. Why are you talking about Juan Mancias? Why are you talking about the people that are at the National Butterfly Center? People in the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe. And she says, because they're involved with the caravans, and I identified them, and Cindy also identified some of them. That's why I started talking to her. And what is his response? Basaldou attacks me and slanders me and says, did you know that that woman has been calling for violence against the activists? Flat out lies and says, I called for violence against these activists when all I have done is show you their own posts, their own videos, their own words about what they're doing in Mexico and at the encampment. And then she corrects him. She says, Cindy has not called for violence against anyone. She has not. And then he corrects himself and says, she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to call for violence. By virtue of reporting and recording and documenting what these folks are doing, I am being accused of causing harm, bringing violence or inciting violence against these activists, merely for reporting, for documenting and for reporting. And this man is making up the fact that these people are vulnerable. I've shown you what these people are involved with. They love to get up in the faces of cops and be in the middle of clashes. These folks were involved in clashes with the Border Patrol and the caravan. Let's roll a little more of the audio.
People get
react. People react sadly. And so I guess I'm asking is, are you aware that that is a possible outcome when you present in such a way?
I am doing a network analysis, and there's no other way to. And I don't have an IRB because I don't need an IRB. I am just analyzing the interactions in the social media. I am not, for example, in this case, I am not going to write anything that Mariana is telling me because, I cannot simply. Because I am trying to understand, I'm never going to put anything in written in my work of this conversation that I'm having with all of you because I don't have the permission. With this network.
So just to be clear, she's talking about the recording that you're listening to not being published in any of her journals, in any of her work that she is putting out as a professor working under the university, right? This recording, which she had permission to make, also documented something I don't think the professor understood at the time, which is the contempt that this Butterfly Center director has for the professor, for myself, for our work, and for this administration and the people building the wall. They have some true hatred. And all she and I were trying to do was to document, research, and report on these individuals. Let's take a listen.
Work analysis, I'm not talking to people. I'm just saying these people are connected. They participated here and there. Some of these groups, the ones that I know, the ones in the caravan, the ones that are mobilizing for the caravan, have been called by many human rights advocates in Mexico, the Catholic Church, people who have been on the ground saying, I don't like this. They are harming innocent people by mobilizing them.
And who doesn't give a shit about people or harming them?
Them.
Trump.
Yes, and the companies.
And the companies.
Particularly the companies.
They don't care about poisoning our water. They don't care about destroying the earth.
They don't care about murdering people.
Exactly. Which, Rogelio Martinez. Who do you think killed that Border Patrol agent and left the other one with severe brain damage?
You talked about, that's a very good question. I didn't
Okay. Remember in the presentation that she did where Mariana Trevino Wright says that these two Border Patrol agents that were killed, one of them was killed, one of them was left with permanent brain damage or something like that, that they were martyred, that someone in a conspiracy murdered them to have an excuse to fund the border wall. And I told you that you were going to hear her in this interview elaborate on that allegation of conspiracy. Here it is, so listen close.
Martyred for border wall for the first $1.5 billion.
I understand it conceptually, but how would we know they were there? Who killed them?
Well, we're never going to know, especially since there's a full-blown cover-up related. I mean, all we know is they died in the middle of the desert with no witnesses and no memory.
What you want to
in the midst of the budget battle, when all Trump wants, the only thing he wants is this border wall built. And that morning, everybody wakes up to the tweet, oh my God, our brave men, and you can find the tweet yourself, we must build the wall. And a lie gets all the way around the world before anybody even has a chance to say, wait.
What you're talking about is just because they both died, the community thought that they were murdered by an
Not the community. Most people,
not the community.
Who knows what they think?
I mean, I'm talking
people
about
who live on the borderlands and understand how this kind of stuff happens.
They would not believe that. That's correct. But, I'm talking about the public sphere. I mean, the
public sphere,
opinion.
They probably think these guys were murdered by immigrants or hit by a truck or whatever. But
so this fed the negative rhetoric.
Exactly. It is what helped Trump get the first $1.5 billion for wall.
Right.
It was the death of those people, that lie that went round the world. Every investigation has since proven that they were not killed by migrants.
Right.
But there's been no disclosure of the evidence or what might have or who might have. Right. In fact, the investigation was probably squashed.
That's right.
Because at that point, Trump was in charge of the FBI and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Lost.
What you know, if you have half a brain, is these people were murdered by probably civilian contractors, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
In order for Trump to get the border wall started.
Right.
In order for that congressional vote and appropriation to go his way.
Of course. I understand that.
And then the migrant caravan was timed exactly the same thing ahead of the budget battle. Now we don't have to have another crisis because we have a state of emergency and he's just raiding the coffers under the state of emergency. So miraculously, the other thing is, you want to do your statistical analysis? Go back 100 years and catalog how many Border Patrol agents have ever been killed on duty.
How many? None.
Virtually none.
Okay. There it is. She claimed that mercenaries were hired to kill these agents so that President Trump could fund the border wall, so he could get his first $1 billion funding. That's the allegation that she is making. And in addition to that, you can hear the thinly veiled contempt that she has continuing to attack this professor. If you have half a brain, she says, you would know, you would assume, you would automatically jump to the conclusion that the president had these two agents murdered. Duh, estúpida. Right? And then she's like, you want to do your network analysis? Why don't you do your network analysis on this? Again, very thinly veiled contempt for the work and the research that we merely documented and reported on. That's it. And I'm going to continue to do that. I think that this recording, this interview, and what she says in it is earth-shattering. I think it's a game changer in terms of those people fighting about the construction of the border wall, especially in this particular area, and the lawsuits that are involved with the Butterfly Center, the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe, and the numbers of activists, including the lawyers group that I've shared with you. So I am asking you to share this everywhere you can. I am not done with this recording. I have more to share with you, which I will be bringing in a subsequent report here on A Mexican Crossing Lines. That's all I have for you tonight. It's a lot to digest. I know it's like you just went to a graduate college course, but it is so important for us to understand and document and listen to all of the evidence in order, because as tedious and lengthy as that is, it's the only way for us to know exactly what is happening and who is involved. I don't like other people to chew my food and digest it for me. I prefer to do the work myself. And I also like to show my work and my receipts to my audience so you can make your own opinions.
And that's right. And I'd like to mention that there's a problem with YouTube right now, and the people that have hung in there this whole time, it's cutting in, cutting out. I believe it's due to some of the software changes that Google is doing, but I'll be researching that, make that correction by the time we do another show. And I'd like to thank a few people who have made donations. Sophia made a donation and said, is this why people surround themselves with vulnerable people like Native Americans or LGBT, so that Native people follow them? I know so many that would be naive. And that's very true. And then Ms. Red Badger, thank you for the contribution. Ms. Red Badger goes, boom.
Yes, this is very earth-shattering information, folks. I can't stress enough how the revelations by the woman that is currently embroiled in a lawsuit with people that were building the wall near the Butterfly Center, she's raised as a conservative, a Republican. Some of the people in the movies against the border wall are actively, their family members are actively involved in law enforcement and border patrol and border security. She claims that with a lot of anger and rage, many of the people, the Latinos, the Mexicans living in the Rio Grande Valley, support the wall and the border security. And she just can't get her head around it. And there's more things you're going to hear her confess. Because you hear people that are against the building of this wall say every day of the week, right? They will tell you it's not necessary, it won't function, it's going to fall down. There's all of these different reasons why, including the fact that Trump can't fund it and Trump can't build it. And in my next program, you're going to hear Marianne arguing with Guadalupe Correa Cabrera that not only does Trump intend to build this wall, but he's already got most of the funding he needs to do it. So definitely tune in to my next program so you can get the full report, and go check out the presentation that Mariana Trevino-Wright made at this conference. It's chock full of information. And also listen to this recording at the link included in the comments of the show. You can hear it in its entirety. It's available on our website. And thank you very much for supporting the work of this station. You've been listening to A Mexican Crossing Lines with Cindy Gomez-Schempp
And Duke Gomez-Schempp
here on 88.1 FM KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Good night and God bless.